Black Ops 6 is right around the corner, and to get ready for its release, I decided to 3D print the Ray Gun Mark II. I will be giving you guys a step-by-step process of what it took for me to print off and paint this replica, and show you guys any of the problems I ran into along the way. So without wasting any more time, let's jump into the video. So I printed off all of the pieces on my Anycubic Cobra 3, and I will leave a link down below to the Etsy file that I used to print off this model, so that way you guys are able to make the exact same model that I did. Okay, so I got all the pieces printed out, all of them are here. I am going to paint some of the parts because I know not everything on the Ray Gun Mark II is either red or green or black, so I'm going to be hand painting those, but first I want to put it all together, and then we'll move on from there. So originally when I started to assemble the Ray Gun Mark II, I realized that not all of the pieces fit into place properly, and at first I thought it was just that I printed off something wrong, maybe I printed off a different version, but it turns out that it was something else. Okay, so there's definitely a problem here. I've been trying to figure out how to put this thing together. Some of these pieces, like this piece and this piece, are going on pretty smooth, pretty straightforward. Stuff like this is alright. These three green pieces that are supposed to be acting as kind of like the 115 in the gun are not going in, you can't put them in. I've looked at some of these pieces. I think this piece is supposed to go right here, but there's zero way to get into there. This piece is supposed to slot into here, but there's no, you can't. This really sucks. Okay, so I went through and I looked online, and in the comments underneath the model, people are saying that there's no way to insert the green parts into their respective areas, which is really upsetting because when you pay for a model, you don't want to have to edit it at all, especially just to put it together. If it was free, I wouldn't have mind, but I paid like $4 for the model, so that's kind of annoying. I got two options. Either I can go into Mesh Mixer or Slicer and start cutting pieces off and then printing them separately, or since I already have them all printed off, I just take my soldering iron and take off the pieces that I need to, that way I can insert the green rods, which I think I'm going to go with that. I think I'm just going to take a soldering iron and do what I have to do to get these pieces to go in, just because I already used, I would have to reprint these three pieces, which is a lot of filament, and I don't want to waste all of this, especially considering I don't plan on making this like an actual prop where there's parts moving or anything like that. I'm just going to have this kind of be the way it is. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to go grab my soldering iron and take pieces apart. So that is what I proceeded to do. I just grabbed my soldering iron and melted a hole in the handle of the gun, so that way the 115 green part could actually just slide straight into where it's supposed to go. This is a big issue, especially if you are paying for a model. Like I said, you do not want to have to edit it just to put parts together, especially when there's nothing moving and you just want to assemble it and make it simple. This does put a big bummer on the project, but you got to do what you got to do. So if you have this model, this is a solution to help fix that. And once I made a large enough space, it was just a matter of fitting the green circular cylinder part into place and letting it sit in there. Next part was the upper part of the barrel of the Ray Gun Mark II, and yet again it had another green cylinder that was supposed to fit into place and was completely blocked off by the way that the model was sliced. So I decided to just melt my way through the back part, slide it in, and then re-solder it back on. And this is pretty much the only way that I could see of doing this in a timely manner without making a huge effect on the model itself. So if you do run into this problem with any model out there, just try to solder it maybe and put it back together. It is a little messy, and definitely wear a respirator while you're doing this and be safe because soldering irons are hot and you're melting plastics. So even though PLA is a safe plastic when it comes to melting it and there being no vapors, still just save yourself and wear a respirator. Once I was able to fit that piece into place, I just grabbed the soldering iron and refixed the model. And once I was done with that part, I just wanted to test to make sure that the model was still fitting into place correctly. and it did. And luckily where I melted the plastic was actually where the two pieces connected, so it didn't even affect the actual look of the ray gun Mark II, and I was able to hide the flaws seamlessly. And next up, for the final piece, I just decided to completely cut out the black barrier so that way I could just seat the green piece in properly. And I wasn't going to try to fix it. At first I tried to make it so that way I could reattach the parts, but it was just going to be too much of a mess and it wouldn't have looked clean. So I decided to just completely remove them and leave them off on the part of the gun that would be facing away from you anyways. And I just left it at that. Once I was able to manually fix all of the flaws with the model, it was just a matter of putting all of the pieces together and gluing it and soldering it so that way all of the pieces stuck to where they're supposed to. And then after we're done assembling it, I'm going to move on to paint. Once the ray gun Mark II was assembled, it was time to start the painting. And first up we have gunmetal gray, and this is going to be used on a variety of different parts of the weapon. And I just went based off of a model that I found online. The ray gun Mark II changes a lot between Black Ops 2, Black Ops 3, Black Ops 4. So I just decided to go with whatever looked the best to me, and I just started to paint different parts of the gun. Once I was done with the gunmetal, I then moved on to a gold, and I used this gold in replacement of the bolts. The way that the modeler had the bolts set up in the file was literally how it would have been on the gun, so pretty much you couldn't print off any of them because they were all in different places. So I just decided to paint on gold instead of trying to print off all the bolts separately, and it worked out really well. Once I was done with the gold, I then used the citrus green, and I tried to find the best match that I could to the rest of the green that was on the Ray Gun Mark II, which it doesn't match too well, but it kind of is supposed to look a little bit more magical near the end of the gun. So I just used the citrus green on the two ends of the, I don't even know what you would call this, the hooks on the end of the weapon, and on the sight. And once I was done painting, it looked pretty good, but there were still a couple of things missing that I wanted to change. So the first thing I did was cut off all of the plastic wires, and I was going to replace them with actual wires to give it more of a realistic, not so plasticky look. So I just cut 3 small wires and used them to give the gun a little bit more realism. Once again, using my soldering iron, I then just made a small space for the wires to go into and just melted the plastic around it a little bit to hold it, and that's all I did on all 3 of the wires. And finally, I knew that I wanted to replicate somehow the sight that the Ray Gun Mark II has, which is sort of like a floating reticle inside of the sight. So I had to try to figure out a way to make that. So what I did was I took this clear filament and cut it into 3 pieces and oriented them so that way it was the same way as it was in the game, and used this neon green paint to paint just the ends of the clear filament, and it sort of gave it this floating reticle effect, and I think it came out really well. And there you guys have it, the 3D printed Ray Gun Mark II. If you guys are interested in more COD zombie weapons with the release of Black Ops 6 coming out, I'm going to be making a Ray Gun Mark I replica that's also going to be having sounds and lights and other things that are mixed into that build as well. I'm going to try to make the Wonderwaff and the Thunder Gun and all sorts of other weapons. So if you guys are interested in that, consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you all in the next video.